Kamala Harris is the first female vice president in the history of the United States of America. And some love her, some can't stand her. And she's always been a true Democrat at heart, but that hasn't kept the people from questioning her right and capability to lead the United States along with the current president Joe Biden. During their years in office, they haven't done anything special, but perhaps their future holds more than it's currently predicted. She grew up in a diverse and loving community with supportive parents who was successful in their own right. Now, her mom was a pioneer in her field and inspired both Kamala and her sister. Even before she could walk, she was involved in civil rights marches through her parents, who did their best to make their daughter aware of the issues of our current world. She learned about political leaders, especially those who advocated for civil rights issues. She went on to graduate from Howard University and the University of California Hastings College of Law. Throughout her entire life, she tried to live by her mother's words. Kamala, you may be the first to do many things, but make sure you're not the last. Now, part of her mother's quote has been fulfilled. Now it's just a waiting game to see who her successors will be. Since being sworn into the United States Senate in 2017, she has championed legislation to fight hunger, provide rent relief, improve infrastructure, and so much more, as well as working on improving the situation in the United States. She's also worked to keep the American people safe from foreign threats. With the 2024 presidential elections coming up, some are even suggesting that Joe Biden, the current president, ought to step aside and endorse Kamala Harris. Joe has gotten old. The dude was old in 2020 during his first presidential campaign, and he's even older now. Many who weren't supporters of Kamala are now turning to her as the last streak of hope for the nation. A CBS News poll has found that a whopping 72% of voters don't think that Biden has the mental and cognitive health to serve the nation as its president. This means that Democrats technically don't even have a capable candidate. And this presents a huge blow to the Democrats since the elections are basically over before they even started. This is the main reason that people are turning to Kamala as the person who might just be able to save democracy. Of course, she isn't without her faults. Now, she's always had passionate fans, but she's also had heated haters too. A lot of the hatred might stem from the obvious reasons. First of all, she's the first woman to be vice president. And second of all, she's the first person of color to be vice president. Now, those factors by themselves don't represent anything bad. They actually prove to us that the nation is moving forward. And that, albeit rather slowly, some stereotypes are being left behind. Unfortunately, there's a lot of Americans who simply can't stand the thought of a woman like Kamala having any chance of being president. This chance is actually much higher for her than it has been for the vice presidents of the past, as she's the VP to a man who's gonna be 82 in 2025. Now, if you're liking the video so far, then please make sure to show your support by clicking on that like button. Some of the blame for the dislike of Kamala also stems from her and her unforced errors. Now, at the beginning of her campaign, she did have rather unfavorable media appearances, and during her first 2 years as VP, she cycled through staff at an alarming rate. Her approval rates are abysmal, to say the least. At only 28%, she is one of the most hated vice presidents in the modern history of America. But now the question is whether to not she can turn those numbers around before her chance for presidency comes around. Now, besides the race and gender explanation we mentioned earlier, there might be another explanation too. Upon taking office, Ms. Harris was tasked with 2 high-profile assignments. The first one is the same assignment President Biden worked on while he served as VP, and it addresses the root cause of undocumented migration into the United States, especially during the first year of Joe Biden's presidency. While this job is daunting, it is manageable. However, some have described the assignment to include the entirety of immigration and borderland security. Now, this challenge is much bigger and would likely take decades to solve, and it has been taking years since Ms. Harris is not the first person assigned to address and solve the massive issue. Making the situation even more critical, the second assignment she'd been given was to enact a national voting reform. Now, this initiative made sense after Donald Trump's accusations of fraud in the 2020 elections. by reforming the voting process. Such accusations will be even more without stand than they were before, which would stop infighting inside of Congress, at least concerning votes. Imagine having to change a system that's been in place since the creation of the country. Seems kinda hard, don't it? Now, with two impossible assignments hanging around her neck, it almost seems as though Miss Harris has been set up to fail. Now, these past few years, she hasn't been able to bring any sort of reform or change concerning her assignments, which is not shocking when we take into account the complexity of them. Now, it's unfortunate that she's taking the fall for not solving things that are frankly not her problem to solve, or at least not hers alone anyway. Now, she also doesn't got enough time to solve these problems, and a few people that she has under her employ are simply not enough to speed up the whole process. There are also some issues about her campaign as well though. Now, many have noticed that she doesn't have a specific goal in mind, unlike other politicians. She flip-flops from issue to issue, shortly concerning herself with each one before moving on to the next. Now, not only does she change her focus, but she also changes staff for unknown reasons too. Both her communications chief and press spokesperson departed during her first year in office. Now, two things are suggested to be the reasons for the departure of staff. Now, first, Ms. Kamala is a nightmare to work with. While demanding bosses are not an unknown in the political world, Kamala lacks the effectiveness and ability to inspire others to make working under harsh conditions possible, or, well, even bearable. When people are inspired, they tend to make even the seemingly impossible a reality. But when they don't have an ultimate goal to work toward, that's when the issues start showing up. The second reason that's believed to have influenced her staff to leave is the seemingly bleakness of her future political career. Even though she's the closest anybody can be to the ultimate prize, the current dislike and age of Joe Biden make it unlikely that she'll be able to take power for herself. Just like we can see this unavoidable downfall, her staff can see it too. Now, we suppose that working for somebody who's doomed to fail and being associated with that failure is not exactly a good enough reason to stay with a reportedly unbearable person. Kamala Harris's political career could go in a few different ways from this point on. Now, President Biden continues to serve another term as president. She's going to continue as VP with a chance to become a president herself if Biden steps aside for her, or if something unfortunate were to happen to the guy. In the case that he loses, Kamala is set to run in the 2028 campaign. Now, this of course doesn't guarantee she's gonna win, but she will at least have a running chance. It's safe to say that her future doesn't look as bleak as it may have seemed a few years ago, but it still isn't at the point that it should be. We can only hope that she'll learn from her mistakes and move forward with a clear head and an actual objective in mind. So what are your thoughts? Make sure you sound off in the comment section down below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.